Hi, this is Carolyn Wainscott, and on Faith Quilts today I'm going to be showing you how to finish your quilt with cording rather than the traditional quilt binding. Now you don't put binding on a quilt until it's completely quilted, but if you choose to put cording on the quilt, the cording is applied to the quilt top before it's quilted. So I had my cording and bias cut strips. I just happen to have this roll of bias fabric that matched my quilt top super. Had my quilt top done. Place raw edge of the fabric to the raw edge of your quilt top and sew it all around using your zipper foot or cording foot so that you can get as close to the cording as possible. Another thing to remember when you choose to put cording on, whether you're going to quilt by machine or hand, don't quilt all the way up to the cording. Leave yourself a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch without quilting. That's to allow space for your back to be folded in and machine stitched. So this top has been quilted. The cording is on all the way around. The back is on the quilt, and the batting has to be trimmed so that you don't have bulk in your edge. So the batting is being trimmed to the edge of the seam. You want to fill the quilt to the edge. Like when you're binding a quilt, you want that binding filled. That's to help with the wear and tear on the quilt. After the batting is trimmed back, I'm going to take my straight edge ruler. I'm allowing 1/2 an inch from the edge of the cording . So the back is going to extend 1/2 an inch beyond your cording. So as soon as I finish trimming out the batting all around and the backing, we are ready to turn in the back, the 1/2 inch. This is why you're leaving the 1/2 inch clear and not quilting up to the edge. I'm folding the back over the batting. And I'm going to go back and machine stitch all around, and the quilt will be done. In order to make it a little easier to apply the cording, I rounded the corners of the quilt so that the cording would lay nice and flat. Another thing to remember, whether you are hand or machine quilting, you need to make sure that your back of your quilt is a couple of inches larger than the quilt all the way around. That way, if the quilt top stretches, you have plenty of room for your back. In this case, with the cording treatment, it is crucial to have at least this 1/2 inch, and I'm having to trim out more in order to have a really nice finish on the back. So I'm coming down to the home stretch with finishing up the back of the quilt onto the front. The batting was trimmed back, remember. The back of the quilt, have a 1/2 inch that I'm folding back. Here's my cording, and the front of the quilt. I'm using my zipper foot so that I can get a nice close stitch to the cording. I'm using my buttonhole stitch, which is one of my favorite stitches on my machine. Use it a lot for a lot of applique. And I used very little pins to pin this back. But I'm coming up to the 4th corner. My machine is in the needle down position. That way anytime that I stop the machine, the needle is already down. And see how much nicer the cording is going to lay by having rounded the corners of the quilt rather than the squared corner. And the stitching is done. There's the buttonhole stitch, the back, and I use the same color thread on the front and the bobbin. And that's a nice different treatment for a quilt.